Hello, Morland. Welcome to Speaking About Everything. With me, I have a very interesting person, a politician, been around for a long, long, long time. Leader of the Democratic Party of St. Martin, MP, Sir Wescot-Williams. How are you doing?
I am doing very well, and thank you once again for having me on this program. It's always good to be able to have these discussions, televised discussions, broadcast discussions, where you talk about matters that are affecting all of us on St. Martin. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Maybe I never asked you this question this way, but you always wanted to be a politician, or it happened by accident?
It kind of happened, I must say. Not that I had my sight set on becoming a politician, but once I got into public service as a civil servant, there's where I actually started that urge to want to do more, that urge to want to be part of the decision-making level of the country.
Yeah.
And once I started, for me, at least, there was no turning back. So I went through every possible phase that you can imagine in politics. I've served on the executive level, both in the island territory of St. Martin as well as since we have become country within the Dutch Kingdom. I've sat in opposition, I've been part of many coalitions. So I have kind of, ran the whole scope, ran the whole gamut, as they would say, in politics in terms of holding different positions. And
You also led the delegation to the Netherlands during the negotiations for separate status, right?
That's so very true, and I always like to not reminisce about it, but definitely go back, to those times, because it shows St. Martin Oral a couple of things. One, when politicians make a decision that is backed and supported by the people of St. Martin, you really get things done. So once we had that referendum in 2000, and together a small group of us, and at that time I was Commissioner of Constitutional Affairs, and thus I was leading the charge from 2000, when the people of St. Martin had spoken, actually right through 2010, but the last year, so 2009, 2010, we had, and I smile as I say it, we had a change in the coalition. Yes, those things used to happen in island territory days as well. And then the DP was in opposition. We were in the Island Council, but in opposition. So I kept pushing, and the rest is history in terms of, in 2010, we finally, and I say finally, got the new status that the people had voted for. So again, when you see politicians kind of stick to a purpose and you inform the people and you have the people with you, I remember so many pivotal moments in that process in 2006 when we signed off the so-called headline agreement. And, again, I always marvel at the very small group of the delegation, a very small delegation of St. Martin, some of our experts, I don't want to start to call names, but playing a pivotal role in that whole process, especially on the financial side, which became very important, was our former governor, Dr. Randus Eugene Holliday. He was part and parcel, and many, many more. The late Reynold Groeneveld, the late Louis Duzazon, I could go on. We had Joan de Valle, so many but we also believed in the cause that it was no resting, until we got the desire of the people of St. Martin.
A lot of people were surprised. They didn't expect it to happen. And I remember the call he made on my other show, Oral Gibbs Live, in November of 2006, from the Netherlands. And I could hear the excitement in your voice.
Wow, yes, yes. Wow, I didn't recall that part of it, but the November 2006 was exactly when we signed the headline agreement. So that was a very big thing for us. You're right. We were in The Hague, and when that document was signed, and I remember also persons from the other islands, especially the island of Curacao, I mean, actually jumping and throwing themselves down with joy, at that occasion. So you're very right. November 2006.
So when you look back at all of that, today now we have this separate status now for 14 years, and some people feel that we should have remained in the Netherlands Antilles. I've always been against the Netherlands Antilles. My position, I make it very clear all the time. I want to say it again. I've always been for political independence, but I think, and you said it and others said it, it's a process.
For sure.
We're at this stage now.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back, because you're the only really surviving politician in a way right now from that process, right?
Yes, yes.
And I remember I came back to St. Martin as a young man in the 80s when there was the other negotiation taking place at the time. At that time, you was not involved in politics. I don't know if you remember back in the 1980s with Claude and Vance and the whole process.
Oh yes, and in fact, I was in the civil service, and I was an advisor. I remember, like for example, in the year 1988, a delegation going to The Hague to talk about St. Martin becoming independent from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I was part of those discussions, and that is where the change actually started. Of course, at the time, for the Dutch government then, that was a no-no. That was a no-no, absolutely not. In fact, they looked at, because it was an island territory delegation in those days, and they looked at the delegation of St. Martin and said, absolutely not. You know what you would need to do to become independent? And I remember them giving us a list of things, but the urge for a different status, that actually started around then. So we came back home, sort of defeated in our purpose, but it didn't stop. And then you would remember we had different, so then the Netherlands Antilles as a body, they started to look closer at St. Martin, because one of the things that I believe made us strong in those days was that what was, notwithstanding the Antillean constellation, what was important for St. Martin, we went for it. We went after it. We decided long before it was legalized to be so, that we would have allowed schools on St. Martin to teach in English. That was impossible based on Antillean legislation, because the Antilles was responsible for the legislation on education. We had to, and we still have to, pay for education on St. Martin as taxpayers and as government. So, those kind of things kept us constantly on the go. But following that period there of going to the Netherlands and saying St. Martin wanted to become independent, and then, but the thought process for a change had started then. And so we had, when they're coming up now to Hurricane Luis, and because remember, earlier in a referendum, the people had voted, and that was in 1994, we had a referendum as well, and the people of St. Martin voted to remain in the Netherlands Antilles, as part of the Netherlands Antilles. And then the following year, we had Hurricane Luis. And then persons who did not know it realized that the decisions that Willemstad made on behalf of St. Martin in the area of taxes, that's when the turnover tax had come into play, because the Netherlands Antilles needed to introduce a structural adjustment program, a SAP, dictated by the IMF. And so following the hurricane and the issue of the turnover tax hitting us in 1996, and people started to realize, we needed to have representatives who could decide for us in all of those internal matters. That's where the process started.
Yeah.
And by the 2000 referendum, then we had a change that we spoke about earlier.
So you say that with Poirier being Prime Minister of the Netherlands Antilles at that time, and forcing the turnover tax onto St. Martin was a part of that whole process.
without a doubt. And if I look back at it, clearly you see where then people started to think, because the Netherlands Antilles was there. We had persons of St. Martin who were members of parliament. I served in the Antillean parliament for a year in 1998, 99, but then when I had to come back to become commissioner, I couldn't be a member of parliament, and both Theo Heiliger and myself, we served on Curaçao, and then we decided to come back to St. Martin. And so that process was ongoing. We had the Windward Island senators who would travel to Curaçao and have meetings there. But I don't think everyone realized sufficiently at the time that the Netherlands Antilles was responsible for many of our tax laws, our health laws, our education laws, and some other laws. So when it was not convenient for especially the bigger island of Curaçao, you would have seen decisions taken that were not in the best interest of St. Martin. So that kind of thinking, but wait a minute here, we deserve better on St. Martin where representation is concerned, and hence the whole process to come to what is labeled a constituent country within the Dutch kingdom. And that constituent country in another association, that is something which is typical and attributed to the situation of the Dutch kingdom. So some people often ask, okay, you're a country, and what does that mean? So are you sovereign? Are you a sovereign country? What are you? And that's where the part of constituent. So we're actually a part of this larger body. And I always explain it further oral to say that the kingdom and the kingdom charter in its pure form would be one of the UN's political statuses, which is in free association. That is a terminology used by the UN for persons to decide on their own political future. What happened is that when that decision was made, we stuck, and we still are, with the same charter that was issued in 1954 under complete different circumstances. In its purest form, not even purest, in its pure form, we should be in an association in which we are totally responsible for all internal matters, except for the matters that together we agree would be part of the bigger whole, which is the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And again, in its pure and ideal form, that would mean nationality, defense, and foreign affairs. Those three areas would be kingdom areas. But then, and this is a discussion, I guess, for another time, but then when you look at some of the loopholes in the charter and the way they are used by the Dutch government, that's where the constant friction and disagreements come into play.
In case you've joined us, this is speaking about thing, my guest is the leader of the Democratic Party of St. Martin, and she's also President of Parliament, MP Sarah Wescot-Williams. You're here speaking with her on Hot 99.9 FM radio, Facebook, and on YouTube. When you look at St. Martin today, and let's jump back to 1995. In 1995, you was in government.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and the position you held at that time in government was?
Well, for years, I held the position, which was not a formal position, which was, we used to call him or her her, in my case, the leader of government, to show well that person was actually responsible for the operation of the executive council. So in addition to holding certain portfolios, I also carried that title, albeit that, that was nowhere regulated or so. It just became the one. Exactly. So yes, that's the.
There's a real way I asked that question. Real power is the ability to get things done. And I don't know if you remember, but after Hurricane Lois in 1995, there was an issue in terms of people using checkbooks, etc., and credit cards at the supermarkets. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of complaint. And I remember calling you. Mm-hmm. And then you got in touch with Enriquez at the Window Island Bank. Mm-hmm. And the whole matter was solved in one day.
Yeah. And and Oral, I often think back at those times, and I think those times were really conducive to St. Martin's development. A figure like, and we had him at other banks as well, like the late Mr. Henriquez, for example. Persons who understood St. Martin and the St. Martiners and actually knew that these persons were not out to trick the institution or to trick the bank. So they would do things like, right away when they needed to be done. And so you had it like across the board because the people needed that kind of assistance, attention, and they gave it. So we were in our entire business sector was in a totally different realm. And Oral, I understand all the international requirements, I understand all of that, but it's really, you see where our growth, not only for that reason, to me, our growth has stagnated. But in those days, when you walk into the, I always give a joke in explaining those times. Like you mentioned that example, I remember my late mother, she was already at pension age, according to me, and she walked into one of the local banks here with also a very known manager, and she wanted a loan. She wanted a loan because she was going to build something. And so they're like, yeah, but Mrs. Williams, you need some kind of, guarantee or collateral. She said, put on my daughter's name. And they did. And she got through and told me after, I get through my son, but those kind of ways. But in true St. Martin style, she would have gone out of her way to make sure that she met the commitment. You know what I'm saying? But it was totally different. But I kind of like, okay, let's act on it, guys. This is wrong. Let's act on it. And that really, that was the time that, you saw St. Martin moving forward. Right. Today, oh my God. And again, Oral, I understand the dimensions that led to where we are today. It's not only St. Martin, it's globally. Right. In politics, you have a lot of individualism. We've seen it in our own politics as well. And then, of course, you have all of these kind of regulations, which are necessary. But, we need to find a balance for a small country like St. Martin. Yes, we're vulnerable. Yes, you would have persons who seek to take advantage of us as a country with an open economy. But again, a balance is so, so important.
But, for St. Martin, it's also important because when you look at 1995, you look fast forward to 2017, Irma, and after that, it is so different.
It is.
And I wonder
if
we had this current status now in 95, what it would have been like compared to what happened.
No, true. And again, it had to do with, in 1995, Oral, don't let us forget, the Dutch government poured a lot of money into St. Martin. Okay, poured a lot of money into St. Martin. And at that time, we created a local organization to manage that. We did the reporting. The Dutch appointed a representative in that whole process. And those persons became our biggest advocates. because they saw what was happening on the ground, and together, and the accounting following Hurricane Lewis, nobody, Dutch or otherwise, ever had any negative reaction to that, because we worked together, we did it. You know, the people were more unified. We realized that if we had messed that up, what it would have done to our reputation as a country. We didn't have any World Bank in between. We had nobody in between but a representative that the Dutch government said, you're going to work with the St. Martin government and the St. Martin officials on it. And you saw the difference. You honestly saw the difference.
You know, and Gebe was devastated, and they came back on in December of that year.
Yes, exactly.
With all the destruction that we had at that time.
That's right. It really was, and you know, people are going to say, yeah, but you talk to me. I imagine people could say, not would say. People could say, yeah, but you know, you're talking about time gone by and things were easier then. All of that is true. The world has changed. Social media has become a crucial part of our everyday life. I know all of that. I understand all of that. But fact is that the will of the politicians and the residents of St. Martin was really to move the country forward. Did we criticize one another? Of course we had that. But the foundation was, you know, we gonna move St. Martin forward. We each gonna do our part to move St. Martin forward.
Are you surprised at the results of the August 19 parliamentary election in St. Martin?
Yeah, you know, Oral, I was very, I can use the word upset. I was not in agreement with putting the people of St. Martin through an election again in the same year, just a few months down the line. I was very critical of that decision. The decision was a decision of the government. The government took it based on what transpired 17 days after we had a new Council of Ministers sworn in, 17 days after oral. In all of the hustle and bustle of today, we tend to forget, some of us conveniently, what happened that led us to another election in August of this year. Nevertheless, when I now look back at the election, I say to myself, you know, that was a blessing in disguise, because it cleared up some things, you know, and it fixed some things. My only hope, and that is my focus as the president of this Parliament of St. Martin, is that we would have learned from that. And we need to put certain things like, and I'm sure you two are tired of hearing this word, but we have to work on it, electoral reform. Otherwise, there will be no rest in the tent called Parliament. And so we really need to work on that. But to come to your question, so after the election and seeing that the Democratic Party, for what we were actually clamoring, we saw a climb rather than a decline between those two elections. And I have two things. One, what are my priorities as President of Parliament? So I have outlined those. As I mentioned, electoral reform is one of them. I think much more attention not only needs to be paid to, but also worked on are the social issues in our community. And secondly, as a political party, I really want to see the changes materialize during this period that we, the DP, are supporting a government that really need to happen. Going back, oral, to the issue of, which is to me the hottest issue right now for more than one reason, of Gebe. During the last at least 4 years, okay? So I'm talking about the previous administration that was there. I mean, the ups and downs that we have had with the electricity company. No wonder that we were confronted with the emergency situation, which was just the culmination of what was going on in terms of we don't have sufficient capacity, load shedding across the board. I mean, you name it. But looking back at that period of time, you know how many, not only I, but others, asked of the government that was there the situation regarding GB. Oral, the Parliament's archives are full. The Parliament's archives are also full with answers given at the time. The Parliament archives are full of ministers telling Parliament, well, we're giving you these answers, but I want you to know they come from GB. So in other words, we can't stand in for these answers. We also have that. We have where answers were given to the Parliament of St. Martin. When I say answers oral, I mean in writing. Answers were given to the Parliament of St. Martin, in which GB officials said at the time, under the previous administration, that it's a good thing that we had a new management, because when the new management took over, GB was, and I quote, on the verge of collapse.
Well, it's quite interesting that I said, and the reason why MPA, I say that is because of all the politicians that I know, I think you're the most knowledgeable one today when it comes to GBE. And earlier I said power is the ability to make things happen. And I remember there was a time when GB was at a very critical time, and you intervened when people in your own party was against it. You intervened and solved that problem. Yes. And I don't want to say too much about it, but I'm sure you remember.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and now you're seeing today what's happening. Maybe because we don't really have true real power like we used to have. And maybe, I don't know.
And you know, there is so much going on with respect to, one, GB for sure, and with respect to how we run this country together, okay? And that going segue me right into, again, the issue at hand, and which is occupying the minds of the people on St. Martin. And I guess it's going to be this story. But what I think is unfortunate...
I mean, people are asking why you voted against
that too. And I have some people who are telling me, many, more than I thought would understand what came down with that motion, are telling me, but what do the proponents of that motion think? Do they think we're foolish? So now let's back up now, Oral, to that most recent issue. So what we had a budget 2024 that was passed back in March. So while it was late for the official dates, nevertheless, it was earlier in the year. However, in that budget, you had where the previous government and the previous Minister of Finance, where they added in things like sale of the shares of Winair, and they plugged an amount that they were expecting. They added in a tourist tax, and they plugged an amount. So what you had was that they, for the lack of a better word, inflated the projected income of government to keep it, to say, well, we have a balanced budget,
right.
Okay? So the year kept going. We had elections in the year. We had a stalemate. All of those things happened. Ministers coming in, being screened. Those entire matters was part of 2024. And then we get to the ultimate stick, if I can call it that, with respect to GB. So what happened? GB engines, not now, even before, reached the end of their lifespan, their economic lifespan and physical lifespan in terms of being able to just work, okay? So again, government brings in supervisory board and management. What are we going to do? Load shedding, night and day, all districts, I mean, you name it. And then GB was like, okay, we need urgent capacity. We need to fix some of the engines which are down. And for the future, we need to expand our capacity, our production of electricity. Then, of course, for a while, we had a discussion, but you know that GB and all of these big projects are being developed, and the government is not sort of coordinating that one with the other, supply, electricity supply, and the different developments that are taking place. So back and forth, who blaming who for not telling the other, etc. That went on. And then Gebe, we got three decisions, so to speak. Immediate one, intermediate one, and then a long-term decision. In terms of bringing in generated capacity, in terms of leasing to own, which is the second phase, and then the third phase is to purchase engines. So let us put aside the first and the second and go to the purchase of these engines to add capacity and replace the obsolete engines that are Gebe still pushing them to get something out of them. And then now, okay, so how are we going to pay for them? Gebe is saying we can, but Gebe has not shown the government that they can. Gebe's last annual account is 2019 from what I have seen. I understood the others are supposed to be available in the coming weeks. So then the Prime Minister, who kind of took charge of this Gebe issue, because it's an emergency, it needs the highest level of the Council of Ministers, and then went to discuss with the Netherlands about providing a loan, to buy these engines, the long-term solution for GEBE. And the Dutch government said, yeah, but I need to see you put that request formally in the budget. And that brought us to an amended budget 2024, along with the things that were inflated in the budget. And so then the current Minister of Finance brought this amended budget, including the authorization of Parliament to contract a loan with the Netherlands. The government will actually purchase the generators and lease them to Gebe. So, of course, my and other MPs' question was, but show us some details, show us some details for this 75 million guilders loan that we're seeking from the Netherlands. We want to know, one, is the Netherlands going to attach any conditions to supplying that loan? And secondly, give us an overview of the finances. Government said they don't have that yet. We can't get that yet. Okay, that is what it is. So there are we now handling the budget, the questions and so the questions posed by members of Parliament on an amended budget, mind you, only with a few amendments, those that I just mentioned, with your tourist tax and then this loan for the purchase of the engines. And then, but we had like over 150 something pages of questions and answers. A lot of those questions had to do with GEBE. So we get the answers as far as they could be given. We didn't get like the finances of Gebe. And then, so we went through, we discussed the budget, government comes in, government explains, and why the urgency? Because it needed to go in, the budget needed to go in so that the Dutch could see that we have a budget that, supports the authorization of this loan. And then, so now we got to finalize this meeting, public meeting. We had central committee meetings, we had public meetings, and then, which you can do as a member of Parliament, nothing wrong with that, submit a motion. Is a motion something in our constitution, like some like to say? No, it's not in our constitution. The only reference to a motion in our constitution is that if a minister no longer has the confidence of the Parliament, he or she needs to make their seat available. That's a constitutional norm. And so that has been translated to be a motion of no confidence. In the Netherlands, from which this whole concept was taken over, in the Netherlands, they have different kind of motions against a minister. You could say, I have no confidence in you, I have little confidence in you, and I'm not in agreement with that what you did. All of those things could be formulated in a motion. Nevertheless, our rules of order, which is a policy document of Parliament, a public policy document of Parliament for the operations of Parliament, in our rules of order, it is stated, and again, that was taken over from Netherlands Antilles, that took it over from the Netherlands, etc. But anyhow, we have the possibility for a member to come with a motion on the subject that is being handled, okay? And the motion needs to be precise, it needs to tie into the topic of the day, and needs to carry support, right? So in finalizing the meeting on the budget, we got actually 4 proposals for a motion. One, a proposal for a motion from MP Doran. MP Doran wanted attention for and wanted the amount that civil servants receive or their family receive to assist in the burial cost of civil servants. The motion for MP Doran proposed that that be increased, okay, because it hasn't been for a multitude of years. And so when MP Doran in a caucus proposed this motion, amongst others to me, I said, but you got to realize that there is a annex to that, and that is that citizens, so the family of needy persons who pass away, also can request and receive that assistance. Right. So if you're going to raise it for one group, you're going to and it's based on the same conditions, right, you have to raise it for the other group. MP Doran went back and he changed the motion. He actually changed it, because remember, a motion is not an amendment. So you can't propose on a motion and then I say, well, I would like to amend that motion. No, it doesn't work like that, not in our system. In other procedures, yes, but not in our system. So he did that. That was one. Then you had another motion, and that came from MP York. MP York talking about the Mullet Bay and the zoning and the whatever. Oral, anybody paying attention to the meetings of Parliament must have gotten tired of hearing me ask successive ministers about the zoning for this country and the zoning for Mullet Bay and Kupakoy in particular, on and on. Exactly. Years, and the beaches, all of that, on and on. Constantly I'm talking about that. So when MP York came with that motion, I said, MP York, we're talking Mullet Pond, that was also in the motion of MP York, and put in this motion that, and I actually wrote it out for him. I said, put in the motion that Mullet Pond, for example, is on the Ramsar list to start with. It has a number. We have different studies. We could look at the recommendations, put all of that, and then let's ask the government to reply to Parliament within X amount of time. MP York did that, took the motion, he changed it up, put in what I asked to be put in. And then thirdly, we had a motion from MP Roseberg, and that had to do with the crime fund, which is not something that the MP hasn't been talking about. She has been all along. She too has been asking the minister, how is the management of this going on? And what are your priorities for the crime fund? So she came with a motion. She would like to see these priorities included. She would like to see the crime fund better organized, etc., etc. So we discussed that motion as well of MP Roseberg. And so that was the third one. And then we come to this motion that was initiated by MP Otley. And I said to someone joking just yesterday, because they were like, here he goes again, kind of. And then my response was, if you didn't know better, you would think next month is election. Because so the MP in Parliament used his right to propose a motion. And I always tell them, I say, guys, when you propose the motions, we're going to let the government ministers give their opinion on it. They are responsible for execution. Motion comes up and starts off first with so it talks a lot of things, but important in the talking a lot of things, which are the considerations of the motion, was the fact that the MP actually put the blame on the government in saying, yes, although the people are suffering, the government insisted, that's the word they use in the motion, in the considerations, the government insisted on following through to get his 75 million guilders loan without taking the people into account.
MP, I want to ask you to hold that thought there.
Okay, sure.
I have to go to a break.
Okay,
When we come right back, we're going to continue where we left off. That's the motion from MP Otley, right?
That's right. That's right.
In case you've just joined us, this is Speaking About Everything. My guest is the President of Parliament and leader of the Democratic Party of St. Martin, MP Sir Wescot-Williams. We're going to be right back right here on Speaking About Everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. My guest here on Speaking About Everything is the leader of the Democratic Party of St. Martin, MP Sir Wescot-Williams, also President of Parliament, and also served as Prime Minister on many occasions, was the first Prime Minister of St. Martin too, right?
That's right. That's right.
So everything. So, MP, let's go back to where you stopped just before the break. That had to do with the motion from Otley.
That's right. So I was saying, so in the considerations, the initiators as well as the proponents of that motion actually put the blame on the government ministers, because the motion would tend to suggest, the way it is formulated oral, that in the government seeking the loan from the Netherlands for the purchase of the engine, so that's phase 3, that the government could have included money for relief. That's the way it is stated. And anybody with a basic understanding of finances and budget would understand that you cannot compare a capital expense, so your capex, and getting money, loans for that, and then say, well, we're going to do some operational things with it. We're going to give relief. We're going to cancel out bills. It doesn't work like that to start with. But a little jab at the government in the motion, like, you're going to get 75.6 million guilders from the Netherlands, but you ain't considering the suffering of the people. That is what is insinuated in this motion. And then they get the results. So these are the resolutions. So these are what they want done. Then they start off with a remark about turnover tax, that the government should make sure that is not mentioned on the invoices because that's not customary. No, they are a matter of not being customary. It's a matter of it's not legal. That's not the way our turnover tax works. To have your amount, and then you would add, so the customer would see turnover tax added to it. No, that's not how it works. Anyhow, so but they throw that in, or like, okay, whatever that means. And then they come to this part about giving relief. And they say, let's ask government or Gebe whether it is possible, and if it is, and how far it's. No. They say to give relief by canceling, and now I'm paraphrasing, outstanding amounts for people. So Gebe should cancel outstanding amounts that people have. 50% of their outstanding amount should be canceled up to a maximum of 5,000. Okay, so that's what people are hearing. But in that paragraph, in that sentence, it says one of the most important, and which leads to the misleading that I mentioned. It says, if financially feasible. Now, every member of Parliament who paid attention to one, the claims by government regarding Gebe, by Gebe itself, would know that that is not financially feasible. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. If you know and you pay attention to the information. In one of the same answers oral that I asked government, I asked Gebe, When are you going to reinstate the seniors relief? When are you going to reinstate it? You know what Gebe's answer was? Via the government, we can't afford it. $500,000 a year. That's an answer. That's an answer provided to me and us to Parliament. We cannot afford it. If you can't afford that, what would that clause in that motion do to GEBE? So when you say that, when members of Parliament agree to that, and then they're going to put sort of between, not even between brackets, it's just between commas, if financially feasible. No, members of Parliament, you know it is not financially feasible. So don't give the population a bag of wind. And then it goes on. Did you think the motion stopped there? No, the motion then goes on to talk about reducing the tariff for electricity. Not only for residents, but for commercial businesses as well. Reduce the tariff for the residents. Or when you put those three things together, why didn't the proponents just say, let's close Gebe down, take the concession to produce electricity and give it to somebody else? I mean, like, honestly, because without taking Gebe's finances into consideration, for you to put these things into a motion, you can't be serious. And then to come out and say, oh yeah, but those who didn't vote for it, they are pro-business, they are this, that. I like, excuse you, me, and then of course indirect pushing at the DP, because it's MP Kotai and myself, along with the Prime Minister, who voted against it. But you see, Oral, I have no problem, like some MPs might have, to explain to the people why I am against something. Now, why, if it was feasible, why would I be against something like that? I mean, like, truly speaking, if that could have happened, you don't think Sarah would have been first in line to say, yeah, let's go with it? But not with the information that we have available, that certain things must change at GEBE. I totally agree. Totally agree. But by doing that and drawing out, that's what they're doing, drawing out the government ministers, it doesn't work like that. So what I have done, so I said, okay, let the hype go on for a few days, and then I am going to give the government, I think it's like 2 weeks, and then they're going to come into Parliament and say why that motion cannot be executed. But more importantly for me, for the people, is what can be done at this moment. Or if we look at a fuel clause, okay, and I have a breakdown of how it has risen, okay? And so what we're seeing is that GB cannot randomly increase the tariff for electricity, the fixed tariff for electricity. It is the Ministry of TIAT that can do that by a national decree containing general measures. But it must be motivated.
But there have been some requests for that in the past, right?
They have. And you are completely correct. They have asked for that to happen. But by not supplying the necessary information, it hardly ever happened that was increased. So what we're saying, that's staying there, and GB and government are discussing about the possibility of raising the tariff, and while that does not happen, the fuel clause goes up. And the arrangement, just for people to understand what happens here. So GB purchases 100,000 barrel of oil. And the cost for it is X amount. Now, GB discounts certain amounts of that fuel that they buy, okay? They take off for losses, they take off for their own production, they take off for water, whatever have you. And the amount that remains is actually, in their calculation, what goes to the consumer. So that amount, let's say we reach down to 80,000, and then that cost 160,000, automatically it would then be $2, $2, whatever. That's a hypothetical example. That's the way it is done. So somewhere we need to be able to grab that and say, wait a minute here, guys. This can't continue like this. It cannot. That's why people are backing up, with an outstanding. That's why they're backing up with paying their bills. Many people, and so rather than have that discussion. What we had for 4 years, we had a back and forth, management, government, management, and now you get these motions out of left field, just, which are definitely not feasible. And again, I think it's very misleading to have people believe, oh, but Gebe can do that, man, so why Gebe ain't doing that? So why Sarah ain't vote for the motion? You understand what I'm saying? And I honestly, I have absolutely no problem, and I told them this, defending the way I vote, because it's really how I believe. I try with members of parliament who come to me and say, this is what we would like to put in a motion. I would say, I could support that, but you're going to have to address this, you're going to have to address that. You can't just put down things in a motion for putting it down sake. Yeah. But some people find it hard. They don't see how they could tell the people, how they could explain the people. That's the thing.
Do you have any regrets of voting against that?
Oh, absolutely not. Let them come tomorrow again and vote this. Not with that kind of not for that motion for sure. Not at all. Not at all.
I served on the board of Gebe for 2 years, so I got to know the company very well.
I remember that time.
I was very critical of Gebe all my lifetime until I went on the Gebe supervisory board. And I saw a company in shambles at the time, but at the same time I saw a company where the employees had a lot of love for that company. Yeah. Okay, the dedication and love for the company is amazing when it comes to Gebe. And I'm not going to say anything else more because I know what's going on. I have a very good idea what's happened over the years. Yeah. I've seen the financial situation of Gebe and all the problems. But I'll say one thing though, it boils down to the political will of all of us as politicians to really make it work.
I agree.
We didn't have to be in this situation right now. At the time when I served on Gebe board, it was recommended 2 engines will be bought, and then others on the board said no, one deceased member said no, 1. So I will overrule in that part. But today I live to see if those 2 engines, or even that 1 engine was purchased then, we wouldn't have the problem we have today. So we're still continuing on and on and on.
And I honestly I don't want to it ain't really a dead horse, but I don't want to belabor the point. I was going to say I don't want to beat a dead horse. It's not really a dead horse, but I don't want to belabor the point. But fact is, Oral, how much of the last 4.5 years that we should have been those responsible really focusing on Gebe, but no, it was a back and forth with the government, and the government giving the government commissioning a grid market study, and then the government telling us Parliament, oh no, but Gebe ain't working with us. Then Gebe via the NRPB conducted another study because everybody wanted to talk about renewable energy, etc., etc. And in the meantime, the company was suffering. Did, for example, the proponents of that motion initiated by Otley, did they try to look at the operational expenses, including paying the employees of Gebe when they came with that? When the government told Parliament, all of us, it's not only I am privy to this information, all of us who care to read and look back in documentation, they told us that the cash burned rate of GEBE is 6 million guilders. So what does that mean? That means that the money that they give out is over what they are getting in. 6 million guilders. That's what they told us. I can't go into Gebe as a member of Parliament, but I can hold the government responsible to give me information so that I can make informed decisions regarding GEBE as a government-owned company.
Other thing is TLM. Is another government-owned company that is in serious financial problems right now.
Yeah. And I have told my coalition partners, because we have spoken a lot about GEBE. In fact, we spoke about this Otley motion before it was adopted. and I told them my position. So it surprised no one what I said in motivating my vote on the Otley motion. Surprised no one, because I told opposition and I told coalition how I feel about it. I said, guys, this thing ain't going nowhere. It's misleading. I can't support it. Even if I want to keep rest in the tent, I can't. So that I made that very clear. But the other thing that we also speak about a lot, and I agree with you, it is a serious situation at TLM, another government-owned company. And there, some hard decisions need to be made as well by the company and by government. And that's the process where we are right now. But I am holding my heart with respect to that company. I honestly am. And again, all I have are the details that government can share and which they share with Parliament. And, but it's that is another matter that if we do not address it now, it's going to fester and fester until we all are, oh my God. I honestly and truly believe that.
Another big serious problem growing slowly, SZV.
Yeah.
And are we going to wake up 2-3 years from now and realize the real damage?
You are right. That too is a matter that deserves our attention. The outstandings from government to SZV are large. And overall, when I look at all of these things, and I will say something here, right? Last week we got back from a visit, a parliament delegation from an organization called Parl-Americas. Parl-Americas is a conference of parliaments of Latin America and the Caribbean, in which we discuss very, very pertinent issues. Not only discuss them, declarations are issued. I am going to have a meeting of Parliament, public meeting, explaining our last visit, just like we did for the visit before to Parl-Americas. So I want people to understand this ain't a Par-Latino discussion back and forth, who should go, who are for and who are against. This is Parl-Americas. And St. Martin we inched our way in, because actually we're not a sovereign state. But once we got a little inch in, St. Martin is making waves at Parl-Americas. I can definitely say that. And but so saying all of that to say that we in those kind of settings, you also understand how important it is for synchronization of dealing with issues between government and Parliament and between members of Parliament. We need to really have the opportunity to sit down and name these things for what they are and want to be part of the solution. SZV, TLM, even Gebe. By the way, remarkable is the fact that, and this made me think of it as I say this, that before we dealt with the budget and the 75 million and the motions, we had MP Doran wrote to the government of St. Martin, to Prime Minister Marcelina, suggesting that the Gebe situation was such a grave situation that he was suggesting to the Prime Minister to have a national committee, including members of the coalition, opposition, stakeholders. You see what I'm saying?
That sounds like a comedy.
And so I am saying we got to realize that, and I have been in this business of politics for so long. I understand it. But now when I look at our parliament, sometimes I say, with all the professions to the opposite, with all of them who profess the opposite, you still see some of the old school politics, we're going to try to catch them with this motion. Where would a government feel obligated to support a opposition motion that they do not agree with? That's my point. You can support an opposition motion. You can support anybody's motion, but not with things that you do not agree with. Why? Because you can't come out like I am doing right now on your program, Oral, and explain to the people what really came down and what's behind that motion, the Otley motion in particular. Do I feel I have to do this? Not not really. But then when you see, it now becoming an issue. So now that not only be happy, you get sufficient persons to go along with your motion. Why are you now criticizing those who think differently?
Yeah.
Not only think differently, feel differently about the motion,
I think people get surprised when they see that the person speaking, they were responsible for that company for 4 years.
That's exactly.
And they put their friends and their people with no experience, and
I don't know.
you have the result today of what's there.
I don't know if I have the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
And when I talk about motions, and I always give persons my opinion regarding motions. Yes, it's something in our rules of order, and yes, motions have a place, in the parliamentary operations, and because a large group of members of parliament can get together and say, in this motion, we're going to express our displeasure at what's happening with Mullet Bay, at what is happening, at the way the government is fixing the roads. We can do that. You understand? Because then it's an expression of parliament and basically says to the government, if I was you, I would think twice about the way that you're going about that. So they have a place in there. However, we need to understand that there's very little operationally that the parliament can do. So if we really, really want a motion to be executed, pass it by the government first, and you will understand how feasible or not it is. But just to come with these elaborate motions because they sound good, because they sound popular, again, I will never ever subscribe to that. So when I think back, I smile to myself because we have this motion, and this motion is insisting, not asking, not suggesting, not say, government, please look at how you could give the people relief, because a hard statement by the parliament could be that we, the Parliament of St. Martin, we insist that the government comes with a plan to offer some type of relief. And within 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, we want that plan. Government has work to do. I can understand something like that. But to come with a motion, and they have to do this, they have to lower it with this money, they have to think, blah, blah, blah. They know, and it's at least two, and there are many more examples of those who signed off on this very motion have the experience of having been in Parliament and then going in as minister. I remember MP Irian came with a motion. Motion was passed. Sarah Wescott voted against it. I motivated why. Because again, I thought it was misleading. Anyhow, this motion was to allow first-time homeowners not to pay the transaction tax. Okay?
So that the tax they pay when they purchase
yes, exactly.
the property?
Yes, exactly. So I said, but guys, first of all, it doesn't work like that in our system of taxation. Okay? Because they say there should be no discrimination. So you'll have to get like a whole new law, go, et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow, it was passed not too long after, a few months after. MP Irian, former, then became Minister of Finance. Has that been passed up to the day of today? So he had that experience of basically instructing the government to do something. It was not totally well thought out and well motivated, but he didn't do it. When he got there, and he had the power. But for him, in his talks, it was important. It was a priority. How much time did he not have there as Minister of Finance? MP Otley. When MP Otley was MP before this time, MP Otley came with a motion and, local contractors should get first preference. And he went on in his motion and stuff like that. Right after that, not right after that, I remember he had a whole issue before, he had a while before he became minister. When he became minister, he has been in there for a while. Did he ever pursue that very motion now that he was in the position to execute it? No. And so so you realize, and people need to realize that, too often when these motions come up and are supported, they are more to put, I want to say to shame, but they're more to draw out government and government ministers and to make a popular cry than it really is to see something happen. Than it really is to say, there are people and some groups of people even more so, like our seniors, who deserve a relief from the high utility bills. By doing that, you're also, by finding a way to lower that, you're also addressing the issue of poverty in our population, because we talk about the low pension that our people get. We talk about the high rents and the high cost of living and cost of food, cost of healthy food. So whatever you can reduce in that package of especially our seniors, you are helping them, So let's focus on those who need help. I mentioned, or I don't know if you heard it, but it motivated my vote on this Otley motion. I said, so that would mean that MP Sarah Wescott, let's say I decide, Gebe, you mash up some of my equipment, I ain't getting no recompense for it. Secondly, you're going off too often. If I have a generator, I got to buy my own fuel, etc., etc. So I ain't going to pay you, Gebe. I'm not paying you. Now, Gebe going to think twice. I would want to think, not hope, before they say, well, we're coming to cut you off. So Sarah then builds up this outstanding to Gebe, right? So here comes the motion. So Sarah builds up an arrears of, let's say, 6,000 guilders. And Sarah, if that motion was feasible, would be able to get a reduction of maximally 3,000 guilders. But is Sarah really in need of some type of relief? Is she, you understand what I'm saying? Also, if you're going to just throw it across the board, and then so now people will sit back and say, if that is possible, I ain't gonna pay, because if I then owe them a little 500 or a little 1,000 guilders, and that motion is effected, is put into effect, I can get half of it, basically cancelled. And we know that could never work like that.
Well, it brings us to after Irma and the payroll support program that I believe was a big mistake. It gave big companies a lot of money. No one is paying back to the government, and there was a lot of fraud. Millions and millions of guilders unaccounted for. And these are the things that we tend to don't want to talk about. But I'm sure you're an experienced politician and you've heard about the payroll support program and how it has happened.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. That's not for us to be proud of.
And Oral, and tying that into like this very motion, and so now that we have this whole discussion going on, and I guess the proponents of the motion feel that Gebe can do what they're asking Gebe to do, and then there are two things that has me occupied in addition to what I just stated. One, we have to remember the government went to and will be going again to the Dutch to get loans to buy these engines so that government can lease them to GEBE. Right. And if they don't come with some type of conditions, then I will change, not my name, maybe my second name. I am so convinced that they will. They're going to say, okay, but you're going to have to fix some things in GBD, I think. So these kind of motions, to me, only create all kind of scenarios in the minds of others that might feel there is something not right. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, we're spiting ourselves by making these popular claims.
Well, you see, at the end of the Netherlands Antilles in 2010, right? Mm-hmm. There was a national debt of 5 billion, a little bit more than 5 billion Antillean guilders.
Yes.
14 years later, in this arrangement that we have as a country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, St. Martin debt is over 1.5 billion, I understand right now.
Yeah.
Based on your political experience, are you surprised?
Well, I'm not really surprised, but I disagree with the way that the Netherlands, especially for the COVID loans, while they talk about cooperation and assistance based on the charter, that they still, understanding our situation, not only the situation we were facing during the COVID pandemic, but also situations that we're facing financially, could still, and they act as if they're doing us, and they did us a favor by giving us a loan which we have to repay. I don't really think that fits the philosophy of assistance as meant in the charter for one. So if we continue like this, that debt is only going to if we continue to accept this, that debt is only going to grow. Now, death and solvency are two things that many of our Caribbean countries are facing, because the more you try to get out of it, the more you find yourself dragged into it with things that happen that you can't control. Global things, a hurricane, you understand what I'm saying? There are only so many risks that one can cover. And so I fear that if we don't have serious discussions, we need a different economic model. Okay, in terms of finances, in terms of our budget, we need to change that. We need to take out some of the things that we can get designated funding for. You'll ask yourself, like what so? Like climate change mitigation, okay? If we were to get on some of the bandwagons, regional bandwagons where that is concerned, and we wouldn't have to be from our, I could say for a country like ours, I could call it a measly budget, because you can't kill the people with taxation either. We then wouldn't have to try to finance those things. You understand what I'm saying? Because by just sticking to what we have right now, which is, you want loans, St. Martin? Sure. Are you within the norm? CFT would say, yes, you are within the norm. So St. Martin wants to buy to build a complete new road or a tunnel or whatever they want to do. And then we make up a project for it. And the first ones, according to the CFT regulation, the first ones to basically offer that loan is the Dutch government.
Well, it seems, MP, like the Dutch government is enjoy seeing us get into more debt. And I had Minister Van Huffelen here last year, the year before that. And she said, well, St. Martin debt is great. It's okay. It's what, 44%? Debt to GDP ratio, so not a big problem. Yeah. Yes, it's not a big problem. No, but it's continuing to grow.
Of course.
And it seems like we're not taking it seriously.
Yeah. And then what happened? So what did we have? What did we have last year? Last year we had loans were due. And then you have to get into a discussion with them about the refinancing of the loans. And when it comes to that, then they come up with all kind of new conditions just to refinance the loan. That's why we were in the predicament of having to accept the solution that was on the table for India.
So if you don't play with them, they just carry
so the previous government signed off in order to get refinancing of the loans that we would solve the India problem. And that's why here a couple of months ago, again, Parliament was with its back against the wall because we had to make a decision quickly while we tried, and the minister tried to change some things and get something. But at the end of the day, it was crunch time again. Every time it's crunch time. Now with the 75 million for the engines for Gebe, it's crunch time. Before the 31st of October, you have to make a decision, Parliament.
I'm going to say again, your member, I'm going to say my personal opinion. I'm against that 75 million kilo loan from the Dutch government for GBE. It shouldn't have to be done.
And the thing is,
there are other ways to do it.
And I believe there would be definitely other ways to do it. And I hope I am wrong, but the Dutch are not going to just say, okay, government, here you have the 75 million, go buy your 3 engines and lease them to GB, and we're going to see how you're going to arrange that whole thing. I don't think it's going to go like that.
It's I think we need to seriously look at this island, where we're going from here, and because the more the debt continue, the more serious is going to come for all people, and even for government to govern.
For sure.
So.
And then that's going to have an effect on whatever else you want to do. If you want to contract other loans from wherever, your credit rating comes into play, and people are not going to say, but wait a minute, that's right within their own kingdom. So what are you going to do if St. Martin doesn't pay its loan tomorrow? Yeah. Then, son, what is the Dutch government going to do? But one thing, and I agree with you, we need to have that discourse. Where we want to go, where do we want to go, and how do we want to get there?
And the other thing too, I know former MP Panoflet was talking about debt forgiveness.
Yes, exactly.
And
debt cancellation.
Right. He didn't get the kind of support he should have received. Mm-hmm. I think it should be on the table again.
You know why I think, Ora? Because that to me was sort of a, Lord, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it, like a kind of a knee-jerk. When I say knee-jerk, no, not knee-jerk. It just was not well thought out. If you're going to come with our proposal, which I think is a worthy proposal, but you have to have your ducks in order. You need to have a plan. You need to be able to show, look at what this debt is doing to us. Not just in political talk, but documented. Is there where you want us to get, Holland? You say we were going? Every time it's a refinancing, you're coming with new conditions, you're forcing something or the other on us. That's the kind of, that's the kind of plan we need to walk with. We need to be able to show the world. Because right now it's like, here are those spoiled St. Martiners, they want more from the Dutch kingdom and it's Dutch taxpayers' money. You know what I'm saying? But do you realize what your actions are doing to us as a country? That's the question. And we need to be able to show what it is doing to us. Very objective and precise.
How you feel about, we still have a small percentage of our people paying taxes. And a lot of people come to this island, open business, function, make money, and don't pay taxes.
Yeah. And that's why, and that's, Oral, that is next to, Gebe is something of more recent, but next to electoral reform. Tax reform is something that I have heard definitely
that's a long, every year.
Before and definitely since we are country, from every political party, from every faction. Individuals come with their own proposals. Government then approves a framework, and and on and on. But we have to make our tax system work for the economy that we have. And so if we don't have a synchronization with our tax system and businesses, then, and how businesses are established, we're always going to be running behind the board, because by the time we get our act together, the business might be up and gone, they change, they whatever, you know what I'm saying? Because that whole process, we need to get a hold of it. And then we take and we deal with the issue of tax reform. And like the current minister and I have constantly been discussing, we got to be able, because everybody waiting for this big plan, this big tax reform plan. And every time, by the time we get to it for decisions to be made, then you got a back and forth, and then we're years further again. There are some incremental issues within our tax system that could be dealt with now for the benefit of the government and the taxpayers. Incremental things. The minister has been talking about it. Reducing this profit tax. When you look at the profit tax and you know what I'm saying? So why can't we do those incremental things while we going to deal with
Why does it take so long? Because I understand international now, they're bringing it down to 15%.
All of that. You understand? But we in a constant dialogue about issues that need to be changed, and then somebody will come and throw a spoke in the wheel, and then we're afraid to maintain our position, because otherwise they're going to say, yeah, Oral only saying so because of this, and Cyril only saying, you understand what I'm saying? And then we go back in our shells, let them figure it out then, if they feel that way.
Well, I guess you're the last surviving politician that survived everything. I mean, I remember sitting and watch you walk out of the Island Council. I've seen a number of things, and you survived. And I've said on this program sometimes, I said, well, she's on life support. They're finished over.
And the next week off again.
So, I mean, you've survived everything, and I think we have to admire you for your commitment, dedication, and sometimes I think people don't realize the amount it takes from being a politician, especially when you're a leader in the capacity of youth. So I think
definitely, and you know, and Oral, I mean, and talk about sacrifices, talk about the blows, and you know that. Well, I have endured them all, but I also am quite cognizant of, you know, of my victories and my accomplishments, you know, and but even Sarah. And you see, right away I'm going in a slow mode as I'm talking, right? You know, even I you know, kind of like, planning, you know, like, okay, when and what comes after. You know what I'm saying? I think the Democratic Party is at a good position right now, and I would like to see you know, the upcoming Democrats kind of, you know, push for even higher heights. That's so in addition to getting some things done by Parliament as a collectivity, so us together, I'm also looking at that angle of the Democratic Party.
Well, I guess they gotta be true politician. I know the former leader, you always make remarks about you as a very, very intelligent person. That's the late Wadi, you know, always. Never heard that from no one else like he said about you. It's proven, you know. I hear people who work with you, former members of Parliament and so forth. I think people think politicians are stupid. They're not. They're very, very intelligent. In fact, they're very, very intelligent. You're one of the unique politicians to survive in St. Martin, and especially being a woman.
No, that's true. That is so true. And in fact, the lecture that I gave at Parliamericas was about women politicians surviving in a male dominated political world. And in fact, some person said to me, translate that into English, because I did it in Spanish and have it on St. Martin, you know, the my discourse. But you know, and the latest phrase in Parliament, or the buzzword in Parliament, is like reading is fundamental. Cause you know that's a slogan. Used to be of our library, etc. And I added a word to that. Comprehensive reading is fundamental. Reading to comprehend what you're reading. You know. So, but
Well, it's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you. And it was really my pleasure being on the program, Oral.
Anything else you want to add very quickly?
No, I want to thank you. I want to of course thank the people, you know, for when they tune in to, you know, to follow this program completely. And I hope, especially with the current issue, you know, this Otley motion, and whether people could get relief, how feasible it is. I thought that was very important for us to have this discussion on, so that people really understand. So again, I'm very thankful, and look forward to doing this soon. Again.
Good. Thanks. I mean, you now hold a record as the most appearance.
I still do. I was wondering.
So that's great. Anyway, thanks again. Much success. All right, President of Parliament, MP Sarah Wescot-Williams, leader of the Democratic Party of St. Martin. This has been Speaking About Everything. I'm Oral Gebe. See you next time on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. Take care. Bye.